If you've ever seen the Ghibli film Laputa, then you know this robot. In this video, I'll share how I made this neat texture and why I'm making this version of the robot in the first place. Dave from Dr. Toys sent me the model for one of his 1M robots and asked me to customize it for DesignerCon. There are a number of really awesome creators and artists doing the same, like David Miniatures, who posted his build video already. I'll link it in the description. I opted for FDM printing instead of resin since it's easier, and I plan on adding a heavy texture to the surface anyway. This decision meant I had a lot of sanding to do. I kept the body of the robot original to preserve Dave's design flavor, and here you can see the original shoulder and now my spiked version. The face of the robot was crucial to getting that Laputa feel. I started to sand and file different size files, sanding blocks, and all kinds of abrasives. Like I said, this is going to take a lot of sanding. The model had some panel lines, like you can see here on the head. I used a Tamiya P-type cutter to deepen the grooves. Resin printing would have given me greater detail here, but using FDM printing meant that things got a little blurred. I spared you all the sanding and scraping, but I will remind you how important it is to wear a dust mask, so you don't get all this in your lungs. The next step I took was to prime everything with this extra strong primer. It can even get paint to stick on polypropylene. Before priming, I sprayed all the parts down with alcohol and wiped the dust away. Everything has a coat of primer, though it's clear, and I also redesigned the arms as one whole piece, since I didn't need to pose them. If you watched my Tonk Mech video, you saw me use this technique a little already. I'm calling it a knockdown texture, because that's almost exactly what it is. It's knockdown drywall texture technique. I mix the modeling paste with some water until it's a soupy consistency, and then just slop it around. Once there's a layer of paste on the part, I use the brush to stipple peaks and valleys into the surface. It's even better to wait a few minutes for the paste to start drying a little. Another important thing to keep in mind is that this stuff dries hard, so make sure to clean it off of anything you need to while it's still wet. I used a toothpick to clear the grooves and it worked perfectly. Once it's all dry, you sand down the high points and end up with a really awesome texture. Again, wear your dust mask. I wanted some of the parts to be smooth for contrast, such as the sides of the body, so I scraped the texture off here. You can see how hard it gets. Now there's a nice breakup of the texture with smooth accent lines. And after all the parts were sanded again, I primed for a second time. This time in brown. The spikes needed a second texture coat to cover some layer lines. And while that dried, I painted up some test pieces I made to find a good color mix. I sprayed everything with a light brown and I dabbed on a warmer tone. I have no idea if this is a real technique, but I found that with the paints that I use, I can burnish the surface with my fingers for an interesting effect. That's why you can see me rubbing all the parts to a shiny finish on the high spots. Dun 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 dun! Okay, time to weather it up. I used Tamiya pigment powders, mostly the soot, rust, and oil stain colors. Nothing special here, just thinking about keeping a good balance. The face got a metallic yellowy gold and some black eyes. Some darker metallics for the back vent. And then Vallejo Dark Earth, straight from the bottle, for the other accents. I used a good gel superglue to assemble. And I made a base with little indents for the feet to sit in, with some subtle surface variation. This will be flocked with dirt and grass colors later. For all of the lines, I used Tamiya black panel liner to add some more definition. The top circle in the chest was not painted yet because I wanted to make it red like the jewel in the robots from Laputa. I would usually use this clear red over a silver base, but I tried to make my own from transparent red and a colorless acrylic. I added some darker areas that will be mossy in a second, and I painted on my red. The last step was flocking. This is my sawdust flock that I made a while back now. I used a super fine mesh sifter to get only the smallest particles. Added some watered down PVA glue to where I needed it, and just sprinkled on the flock. Here's how the base came out. And here's the finished robot. I hit it with a matte clear coat and then a very thin shade of green and burnt sienna. This robot is already on its way to America, and I'm excited to see all the collaborators work together. These robots will all be on display at the 1M Robots booth at DesignerCon, November 15th to the 17th in Las Vegas. As the date gets closer, I'm sure we'll see more and more posts and videos from other collaborating artists. I also want to give a huge shout out to my direct supporters on Patreon: Adam, Andrew Price, Spaghetti a la Mode, Harker, JC Hayes, Gamey Builds, Sabi Hobby, Stacy, and all of my dollar store enablers. Thank you all so much. Go create something, and I'll see you on the next build.